It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Shane Salk. Hey, Shane, how are you? I'm
doing very, very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on this show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. It's a pleasure.
I was intrigued by your bio, particularly because of the work that you're doing. I'm a big fan of old-time radio, and I'm really happy that people are taking this to the next level with podcasting because, you know, it's something that essentially died in the 1950s when television came along.
Yeah. And
the old radio shows of the 30s and 40s, most of them morphed into TV shows.
Yeah. I mean, they're like, I Love Lucy was an old time radio show called My Favorite Husband, which people wouldn't have known. Gunsmoke, which it was the longest running TV show of all time until recently, started out as a radio show. Dragnet, which, you know, most people would maybe know the old TV show or the movie with Tom Hanks, but that is one of the longest running intellectual properties that there is. And all of it started as radio.
Yeah, Jack Benny was another one.
Jack Benny. Yeah. Love Jack Benny. And so I grew up listening to old time radio, the comedy stuff, obviously, you know, I could talk for hours about shows you've never heard of. And I think my parents just wanted to keep me off of TV. But in my mind, Jack Benny and Bob Hope were best friends. But I don't think it has anything to do with each other.
Well, I think in real life they were pretty close. But I know Jack Benny was probably closer to George Burns.
Jack Benny was very close to George Burns.
Yeah,
yes.
I think they were best buddies.
Yeah.
Certainly Hope and Benny worked together. Well, Hope and Crosby, yeah.
Hope and Crosby were pretty dang good friends, I think.
I think so, too. But Jack Benny and Bob Hope certainly worked together.
Yeah, they guested on each other's shows and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. But I heard some things about Bob Hope. Now, I think his comedic timing was excellent, although I like Benny's style better. I always thought Jack Benny was a genius with his understated comedy. I mean, for somebody who could just simply roll his eyes and look at the ceiling and bring the house down. I mean,
Jack Benny, I totally agree with you. Jack Benny is one of the original people that I knew anyway, in quoting the idea of, he was a very generous comedian. He would give the laugh to the guest or to somebody else, and he would be the butt of the joke.
Right.
And he was quoted in saying things like, well, you know, why do you do this so much? He goes, nobody says, oh, did you see so-and-so on the Jack Benny program last night? It says, hey, did you see the program last night? And he says, it doesn't matter who gets the laugh.
Exactly.
It's all, and I love that. And I think that,
that's a lost,
all kinds of art.
I think that's a lost art because I don't see that anywhere, especially on the talk shows around today.
Yeah.
I mean, Carson was definitely a protege of Jack Benny.
Yeah.
And after Johnny Carson, it just kind of went downhill. David Letterman was a protege of Carson.
Yeah.
So he was okay. But you know what I mean? As time went on, now Dave's retired. And the ones that are on today, I don't even watch them. I mean, because number one, there's so much other stuff online. And, you know, the networks have sort of lost a lot of their king of the mountain status, if you will.
Right. I mean, one of the things about the talk shows that I find, and I think this is kind of what you're grasping at too, is that it used to be about the guest, and now it feels like it's about the host.
The host, yeah.
And I see the hosts, you know, instead of doing something with the guests to make the guests look good, they do something with the guests to show everybody how good they are at something. And I agree with you in that. I mean, the Dean Martin celebrity roasts are one of the best things to go and watch because it's just a bunch of friends making fun of each other and loving each other. And the roasts they do today, it's very much like what we're talking about, where it's about the comedian It's about, these people that don't really know each other. They're just making fun of social media and the public's perception of things. And I think we're losing some of the personal touch and the relationships with people a little bit. But everything is an evolution, and we're always evolving. And it's a pendulum. It'll swing one way, it'll swing another.
Well, let's hope so. I really want it to swing back, because I'm tired of this side. And the one thing that particularly annoys me about the network talk shows is that they're very openly political, which is something that Carson refused to do. He never went political in his. If he did a joke about the president or something in his monologue, it was always in good humor, and it didn't matter if it was a Democrat, Republican. It didn't matter. You always were allowed to take some shots at the president because they're the president, but they were never deeply personal. They were never mean. And then during the interviews, he kept it away from that. He talked about the guests. He talked about the industry. And, for me, I want to tune into something like that and forget about all the political crap that's out there for, an hour or whatever it is.
Well, and I think we have different audiences now too. Different audiences want different things. We are in a different social climate, political climate. News is a different thing than it used to be. Information is a different thing than it used to be. You have late night talk hosts that have a political background. So some of those people, that's their jam, sort of. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. They're political comedians. And then there are some that stay away from all of it and just do the silly stuff. So it's a balance. I mean, we talk about cancel culture in terms of the like a comedian tells a joke, and then the comedian doesn't get a laugh, they get in trouble. The comedian comes out and says, well, people are too sensitive, people are this, people are that. I think there's two edges to that, the two sides to that coin, where a comedian says something that, they said something 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago that was funny then, not funny now, and then they get in trouble. It's not of the time. But comedians or people coming out and saying, people are too sensitive now, people don't like this now, nobody's laughing at anything. I think people forget, entertainers and comedians and stuff, is that they don't control the audience. The audience controls them. And people who have been doing it for a very long time are doing the same kind of humor that's not working with new audiences. It's not what the new audiences want to hear. You can't blame the audience for that. you can't go, well, the audience is stupid. Everybody, they hate my humor, but my humor is great. You're like, well, you're playing to the wrong audience. If you're playing to this audience and they're not laughing, that's not the right audience for you. So I always like to say, I'll watch a movie and I'm like, I don't really like that movie. But that doesn't mean half the time it means I'm not the demographic for that movie. It doesn't make it a bad movie. And I think there's something to that in terms of comedians and late night talk show hosts. I would like to see, them bring back that old, like you were saying, the Johnny Carson, where it's about the guest and it's about, this fun thing. Mm. I'd like to see them bring back the things like the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast, where it's friends making fun of friends and it's just fun and playful. It's not hurtful. It's just fun. But there are people that like the other kind of humor, and I can't fault an audience for that, but I can fault creators for training, not giving other options.
Well, who I fault for that is the internet and the vast amount of information and content that's out there. Because what's happened is it's pigeonholed everybody's sort of viewing niche. And I actually wrote a book about this, that I despise this idea of niche. And of course, anybody who thinks that they know anything will tell you, gotta find your niche. I mean, I think that's fine if you're selling coffee, or if you have some sort of a tangible product, you want to find who your market is. But if you go back to what we were talking about, like Carson, I mean, who was his market? His market was everybody, because that was it at 11:30 at night. You didn't have 3 million choices on Netflix and Vimeo and Daily Motion. You had that show, and that was it. So he had to kind of appeal to everyone.
Well, the question also becomes, would he have had that kind of appeal if there were so many other options? I love Carson, but if you had these other options, would there have been? And I don't know the answer to that. I agree with you about the internet, but it is also sort of like blaming the freeway for traffic. You're like, well, it's not the road's fault. It's whoever built the road or whoever is using the road poorly. And I think it's the Wild West. You know, I think you always have to know who your audience is. And I think there would probably be people that would argue Carson's audience was people ages this to this race, this thing, that thing, who are smarter than me, who would figure out that stuff. But I always have to remind myself that, you know, I love that stuff. But there are people that grew up in a totally different economic climate or in a different country or a different political place that may not have liked it. It doesn't make anything good or bad. It's just, you know, the lens that I view the world through. And I also don't, one of the things that I have a problem with the internet as a whole is that it is the best thing for freedom of speech, but it also doesn't, the thing about that is that it relinquishes responsibility. And that's, I don't think that people, when they say, well, it's freedom of speech, I go, right, but freedom of speech doesn't remove you from accountability or responsibility for what you're doing. You are allowed to say those things, but the repercussions of what you do and what you say still are valid. They still happen, and it's not censorship to dislike something. Or if you can't argue free speech and free market at the same time and say, well, you know, I was canceled. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's also free market. That's the people going, we don't like this, get it out of here. That's dolphin-free tuna. You know, we don't like the fact that all these dolphins are dying, so we stopped buying that tuna. They can't go, well, this is just censorship. You're destroying our business, and so you have to buy this tuna. It's a double-edged sword, and I don't have answers. I wish I did, but these are the things that keep me up at night.
Well, cancel culture is a good conversation because it's tricky, because it all depends on who's doing the canceling. And I think what it comes down to is who has the authority to do that. Should we give that power to Mark Zuckerberg? Should we give that power to the federal government? And I think those are the real questions that we need to address.
I don't consider cancel culture, and I think most people wouldn't consider cancel culture something in terms of there's speech that is hurtful and harmful to people. It's against, basic rights or whatever it's called on their platform rules. It's against their platform rules as a broad case of, you know, if you go out and you say, I think we should kill all of this kind of person.
Well, right.
And
there's hate speech.
Down.
Exactly. There's hate speech, and I think most people would agree that hate speech is not really welcome on a lot of platforms.
Well, that's part of the argument, is that I would agree with you, but there are people saying, well, this isn't hate speech, this is freedom of speech. And with like Mark Zuckerberg and some of those people, when they blame him for that, they're like, well, you're just you're canceling me because I said hate speech. You're like, well, kind of, but you need to follow the rules everybody else does, and it's not censorship, it's hate speech.
Well, in a lot of those Facebook and Twitter and things, YouTube, they have disclaimers that said,
right,
you know, if you put up anything on YouTube, I'm just thinking of YouTube, if you put up anything pornographic, if you put up anything inciting violence against a particular group of people, blah, 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 those are not acceptable. They're very specific, what they're telling you, that we do not accept that, and that's fine.
Right.
You know, where it gets a little tricky is when they say things like disinformation, when it hasn't been proven one way or the other if it's disinformation or not, and somebody puts something up and it's taken down, labeled as disinformation, and then they come back and find out that maybe it wasn't disinformation. So should it have been taken down in the first place?
I mean, I guess some of that depends on where, they're getting their information. And you can say, because somebody could say, my opinion is that the sky is purple. And
my opinion is something that people leave off of way too many.
Exactly, and that's
way too many content. Yeah,
the disinformation. There's so much disinformation about those things, and where it can be very harmful. I mean, I don't want to get into the COVID stuff, but we've seen a lot of disinformation about. Some people will say, "Oh, this source says this," and you're like, "Well, the CDC and these 1,200 other sources say this," and they go, "Well, you can't call it disinformation because I have it as this one source." You're right. It can be a tricky thing for these people to go, well, how do we flag this? And some of, like Facebook, I know, was, instead of removing some things, they were just flagging it and going, hey, this is not necessarily true. Here's sources saying that this isn't true. I also wouldn't consider that cancel culture, though. I think cancel culture comes down to the populace, and it's fans or people on Twitter or Facebook, or it's the public that says, yeah, we're not okay with this anymore. We're not going to your shows. We're not listening to your interviews. And then the big companies go, well, for our bottom line, we're going along with the general public on this. I think most of the companies are about the bottom line.
Okay. Let's wrap this one up and get on to.
Okay. I get off on things. I'm so enjoying the conversation.
Well, no, yes. I am too. But we do have a.
How did we get from Jack Benny to this?
Well, like you said, it's the progression of technology, and it started out in old time radio, and now here we are in 2021.
But the brilliant thing is, anybody that doesn't know who Jack Benny is or Johnny Carson can go look it up.
That's exactly right. There is the good side to that.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is that I think all of the major news outlets, all of them, should have a disclaimer before the news saying, this is my opinion. Because I think people are getting a little confused as to which one is actually just reporting the facts and which one is an op-ed. Because I can't tell half the time. It's not Walter Cronkite anymore, if you want to go back.
Absolutely.
And
I totally 100,000% agree with you. And I think, there have been lawsuits against certain networks that have news in the title, and they say, hey, you're putting out this wrong information and all this stuff. And they argue that they're not a news organization. This is entertainment. You can't hold us to those same standards. And I think if you're going to use the word news anywhere, you need to have that disclaimer and say, this is entertainment. This is an opinion. This is a character.
I agree.
Because people don't know.
Yeah.
How are they supposed to know?
And it's only
they made the art. Yeah.
It's only getting worse with deep fakes, and it's going to get to the point where you're not going to know what to believe anymore. And when even to the point of court, where people bring in videos of a particular crime that may have been committed, and you don't know if the video is authentic or not, because the technology is so good. I could create a video of somebody doing anything.
Right.
And it would be very difficult, save for some video CGI expert,
right,
to discern whether it was, artificially created or not.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. And you're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Anyways.
And I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
Anyways, we can have that as a whole other interview. We can have this talk for hours, I'm sure.
Well, listen, if you got time, I'm enjoying this. We can go on.
I got nothing but time.
Okay. Well, I want to hit what you do, actually.
Okay.
And then we'll see where that leads. Tell me a little bit of your backstory. I see audio drama creator, producer, sound designer. Now, did you start working in music? Were you a music guy? No?
I'm an actor.
An actor, okay.
I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theater performance. I've been an actor my whole, from a kid. I did theater in school and everything. I've worked in New York and L.A., internationally with Disney, other states around the country. But like I said, I grew up listening to old-time audio. And I really liked it. And when I got out of college, it was in 2008. And not only was the country going through the recession and, we couldn't find jobs because the lowest paying jobs were being applied to by people who had 20 years of experience who had been let go. So nevertheless, an actor in Los Angeles because there was the writer's strike going on. And so everything was just a thing. So it became let's see if we can produce our own stuff. And a buddy of mine and I decided to create in 2008 an audio series. And again, he didn't really know that I had a huge background in this stuff. And we created We're Alive, which is a zombie serialized thing. And my goal with that is because I listened to so many different shows and different stories of the old timey stuff. And I knew what I liked, what I didn't like in the writing, in the audio. Gunsmoke, I talked about earlier, was like the epitome of great sound design. So we started doing that. And we wrote and we designed and we did anything we could. And at the time, 20% of people in the country knew what a podcast was. So it wasn't a huge market. But it allowed me and allowed us to develop a soundscape and a style and a type and make it authentic and not lean on the writing to go, well, I'm going to go open this door. I'm like, everyone knows what a door sounds like. We don't need to do that. So fast forward to years later, I had been trying to raise money and get it to the point because people started doing more and more audio drama stuff, and they were doing it in this old time style. And I have always felt that we need a new style. We need the new style of things where it's like the HBO of audio. It's cinematic. We have the technology to do this. So why not? So I partnered up with people. We finally got some funding. And Carcerem, which is the series that I've been producing most recently, is exactly a culmination of all of those things. And we don't even have the technology that I want to use, but it's a stepping stone, and it's very cinematic. It's like it's like Game of Thrones meets Princess Bride, but without visuals. So you can be in your car, walking your dog, and experiencing those same feelings and emotions and all of that stuff without the visuals.
Well, I think the technology is super for doing something like you're doing now. because anything can be done on MIDI. You got MIDI sounds up the wazoo for creating anything. It's not like in the 30s when they had somebody walking through snow and they had to put cornflakes on the floor and somebody had to go stomp on them. I mean, I don't think there's anything that you can't replicate, yeah?
Absolutely. And we have very expensive libraries. I mean, we have people come in and record one at a time. So it's very, very produced. It's not like the old time stuff. And I mean, when I say the technology, I don't have access to some of these things. I want people to put on a VR headset and be able to look around and or turn their head and hear sounds in a different place, those kinds of things, which we don't have on this show right now. But you put headphones on and you feel like you're in the middle of a sword fight. You're in the middle of a monster attack. You're in the middle of a magic forest. And that's what we're going for, is a very immersive experience.
Well, that's great. Although, how is that going to transcend to somebody with a phone and an earbud?
It works.
Yeah.
A phone. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we have people that listen to this stuff on all kinds of different devices, and we've designed it in such a way that you can. You put on very nice headphones and you can hear, these tiny little nuances, but you just have your earbuds in, you listen on your computer speakers, you still get that same feeling. You still get all those sounds. You still know what's going on. It's not prohibited by having good or having bad listening devices. You still get a great story regardless. I mean, it's like watching Lord of the Rings on an old TV. You still get it. You may not see all the same colors, but it's still a great story and it's still enjoyable.
Well, I have had many filmmakers on my show, and one of the bitches that I hear from a lot of them is that they put in so much work, effort, money, time into making this great cinematic masterpiece, and so much of their audience is watching it on a phone. Mm-hmm. And they just sort of cringe, but I'm thinking, well, I respect that. I agree with you. However, you have to look at the people that are sitting on a bus or a subway and they watch your film. Not everybody is a cinephile who has a home theater set up with a giant screen. Yeah. By the same token, audio is the same thing. We used to only have vinyl records, so that was your choice. Right. Now vinyl records are sort of reserved for the audiophile music aficionados.
Right. I mean, I'll say, again, it's sort of blaming your audience, and I think it's great. We do put all these things into it, but I'm never going to get mad at somebody for listening to it a different way. I put in all these things for my benefit, for the audience's benefit, but it makes me happy.
Yeah, you got to do it for yourself first.
If somebody listens to it, they're like, I didn't really like it. And I go, oh, I'm sorry. How did you listen to it? They're like, well, I listened to it on my phone speaker that I had in a metal cup and I was across the room. I'm like, well, you're setting yourself. That's like saying, I didn't really like this book. Well, how did you read the book? Well, I read it while I was rock climbing. You're like, okay, that's really not my fault. But again, I'm not going to get mad at the audience because, again, I designed it for people to be able to listen to it whenever and wherever they are. I designed the length of them. They're like 15 to 25 minutes, mostly 20 minutes average. And I designed that length so people could listen to it on their commutes to work. Well, pandemic hit, nobody's commuting. Right. So people listen to it. I have friends that listen to it while they walk their dog. I've had a lot of people say, I tried to listen to this at work and I can't do it because I find myself just staring at my computer because I'm listening so intensely. It's not a casual listen. And so if somebody tries to like, oh yeah, well, I was like cleaning my house and I was listening to it and I missed a lot of the story. I'm like, yeah, that's not the demographic of people that are going to enjoy it necessarily because it's not that casual listen. But again, I can't get mad at people for how they want to experience it. I can just say, if you want to experience it this way, I would suggest it this way.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I wrote down that phrase that you just said, casual listen. I've had several PR people come and go for this show, and all of them said something that I disagreed with, and I don't mean to paint myself as being some hard-ass, tyrant or anything.
Yeah.
But it was a definitely disagreed concept on how I wanted the show. When you said casual listen, what clicked in my head was this speech that I got about audience engagement, about chat room, about premiering and being in the chat room while the interview's going. And I said, no, I do not want to do that. I want people to sit down and listen to my show for 20 minutes or a half an hour or whatever it is. I have shortened the show as time has gone on for two reasons. One, because I'm getting busy and I want to try to get as many people on as possible. But also people's attention spans have diminished over time, and a lot of people just won't sit there and listen to an hour-long show. So I've broken it up into, half an hour segments. But the point is, and that's why I respect what you're doing, is because I'm making a creation for you to sit and listen to. I don't want people doing other things. I mean, if they do, fine. That's their business. But I'm saying...
But it's not designed for
But it's not designed for that. But when you start adding in chat rooms and call-ins and all this kind of stuff, it's a distraction from the interview, from the actual show.
Yeah. I mean, everything that we do at the number one thing that we always do is about the product. We talk about things a lot, and the one reason Bill Holmes, who's my producing partner, and I talk about this quite a bit. I mean, we argue, we fight, but there's no ego involved, because at the end of the day, like Jack Benny, we say they're just going to like the show. It's not about who did what. Yeah. But every argument we have is legitimately because I think this will make the show better. He thinks this will make the show better. And at the end of the day, it's all about the show. If we make the show everything we want it to be, because we know how high our own standards are, and people it doesn't catch on. We don't get the amount of downloads we want. We don't get the impressions. We're still so proud of everything that we've done that we can be happy with ourselves. And I think, like what you're saying, is like, you want to make a show that people enjoy this way. And that's the show you want to make. If you make a show that you don't like or don't like making, why would you make the show to begin with? Don't do it for the money, because it's podcasting.
There ain't no money here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's for sure. There's been so many different things. It's funny because I started out doing acting as well. When I was 18, I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Art in New York.
Oh, nice. I had some friends that went there probably years later. And
I had a great time, but I was really more interested in being a rock star at that point in my life. Music was sort of more my passion. So I hooked up with a band, and I was trying to juggle both, but it got to be too much because the band started to do well. So I quit the school, and then a series of things happened, and I ended up giving it all up and working in a corporate job. And then 20 years later, during that time, the internet came along. And I came back to my creative roots with this whole new world that had opened up. While it was great because I could do a lot of stuff from home that just wasn't even possible before it was a daunting task because I had to start over again. And I was starting over again in my early 40s, which isn't always the best age to be starting over again, because the kids that were 18 and 19 at that time were streets ahead of where I was in terms of understanding the technology.
Well, I graduated college in 2008, and we worked on our craft, and that's what was supposed to, follow you through, is that, your auditions and all these things and then less than 5 years after we graduated, it became, well, how many Twitter followers do you have? How many Instagram followers do you have? They started Twitter casting. I was turned down for very large things because they said, well, this person has more Twitter followers than you. We're sorry. You're better, but they have more followers.
That's the dollars and cents part. Yeah. That's what they're equating, which it doesn't always. I mean, I understand that from a marketing perspective, but it doesn't necessarily.
Right. But that's the world, and you can't get mad at it. You just got to either adapt with it or try to change it.
Yeah, or don't worry about making money.
There.
Yeah. The one thing that you mentioned about social media that I want to bring up, and we were talking about this earlier with cancel culture, and if you go back to about 2007, Twitter, Facebook, they were so benign. I mean, it was just people posting pictures of their cat and what they had for dinner, and it was all very just nothing. And now you fast forward to 2020, which was only 13 years later, and these institutions have become so powerful that they're affecting the outcomes of Western democracies' presidential elections.
Right.
Now, that's a pretty scary leap in 13 years.
I completely agree with you. It's that same argument of like, hey, we can make this power source. And you're like, great, but what if they weaponize it? You know, people have found a way to weaponize social media. While it can be an amazing thing, what do you do when it gets into the wrong person's hand? And again, keeps me up at night. Don't have a solution for it.
It's the virtual version of the nuclear option, right?
Right.
Where you can use it to create cheap electricity, or you can use it to make a bomb.
Right.
It depends on who's controlling it. And I think that really is the ultimate question.
And I think that there is something to be said for, you know, there's always been times in history where this kind of change happens so rapidly that people get scared, and then people figure out how to utilize it, and then it becomes this monster. And then sort of if it doesn't destroy us, we can figure out at some point how to make it unharmful. But one of the problems is it's, you know, society and the internet and all this, it's a group project, and you can have, you know, you got 10 people in your group in high school making this thing, and one person just doesn't want to do the same thing you are and wants to screw everything up. They can. So we have to figure out how to not let the few sway the pendulum into a disinformation or that kind of thing. And I think coming back to, I think you're right. I think when news organizations are entertainment, or they shouldn't be taken as news, they should have to say it. But
the line is really vague.
Very blurry.
Yeah, very blurry.
And there are people trying to keep it blurry because it benefits them, and there are people trying to define it because it benefits them. And yeah, I mean, I think there is just a giant group of people who are trying to keep that line blurry because they can hide behind freedom of speech. You're like, well, this is hate speech. Well, no, it's not hate speech. It's not disinformation. It's my opinion, and you can't silence that. And you're like, well, we got to define these lines. And we are news. We can say we're news. It's just not, it's our opinion about the news. And you're like, but then it's, we need to define what these things mean. And so the general public can follow it.
It's rather like the food market before the FDA, where these food manufacturers at the beginning of the 1900s just put anything into canned foods, and you had no idea what was in there.
Right.
And it wasn't until the FDA came along, or even drug manufacturers. They had no control over purity, over strength, over...
And they could say whatever they wanted.
And they could say whatever they want because it was protected under free speech.
Right.
So when people started dropping dead taking their medication, the government had to step in and do something. Similarly, with social media, it reminds me always of Teddy Roosevelt and the Trust Busters of 1903, where who was it? Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, and there was one other. And the combined wealth that these five guys had was more than the federal government at that time.
Right.
And so Roosevelt took it to bust these guys up because they were going to monopolize the whole United States.
Right.
And
we're there again. We just have people that don't want to bust them up.
Right, and we're there again. That was my point, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's see. I wanted to ask... go ahead.
I was going to say one great thing about the internet is one of the things about the Carcerem is that it really is designed for the visually impaired, and sighted
that's
people.
Great. Yeah.
Sighted people together, they can have a common experience. And because of the internet, I'm able to reach out to some of these organizations and trying to get, a hold of people going, look, I want your communities to be aware of this free entertainment. And so other, bigger companies, Netflix and Paramount and Disney and all this stuff can see what you can do and give you a voice and literally make content for this demographic that has somewhat been forgotten. They do, audio descriptions and things, books on tape, but this is literally designed for these people. And I'm able to reach out to these organizations because of the internet. So it is pretty amazing.
So your content is free, or is it subscription?
Free. It's a podcast. You can find it on any podcasting platform. It's called Carcerem, Carcerem. You can find it at carceremtheseries.com or Carcerem the Series on any social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And it's free. There are ads at the beginning, the end, sometimes in the middle, but right now it's totally free. And there's over 10 hours of story.
Wow.
In the first season.
Oh, I'm going to check it out. This sounds really interesting.
I'd love to hear your opinion. Shoot me a note.
I will do that. Shane, we got to wrap this up. Let's
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
And again, the website is
carceremtheseries.com. That's CARCEREM theseries.com.
Great. Well, thanks again. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Best of luck
as well.
with this.
Thank you.